Hi everyone, welcome to my ranking of the James Bond films. All 24 of them, not including Never Say Never Again. So finally, I'm able to do this video. It's been a few months now since I last done my Bond review. My last Bond review, of course, of Spectre. And a good thing is that I did of course say it'd take a few weeks, but good thing is that it's been this long as I've had some time to sit on it. And actually, a couple have adjusted since then, so it's good that I did wait. And there was about 3 or 4 that I'd never seen before this rewatch, which I started. Actually, I did start Christmas Day with Doctor No. Actually, yeah, and some of them. That's why some of them, of course, were uploaded at different times, is because I just didn't. It took me a while to actually make my proper first YouTube video after my hiatus. But yes, here they are, all 24 of them, and of course I watched them with this Blu-ray set, which highly recommend, and they're all on Blu-ray. So we'll just get right started. Of course, James Bond is one of my favourite franchises. I think roughly 18 of these I do like, and the top 10 I love. Some of these films are in my top 100 of all time. I think James Bond is just legendary. Had some dips, but speaking of dips, we'll just start off with number 24, the worst Bond film of all time, and also my least favourite, Die Another Day. Lee Tamahori did not know what I did not know what he was doing with this film. This is by far the worst Bond film for me. It works on really no level whatsoever. There's maybe a decent sword fight scene that I maybe didn't mention in my review. That was pretty good. And the opening scene, yeah, it was interesting. It had some decent action. It was raising some questions of legacy and stuff that I thought would follow through maybe in a decent way, but what this film turns into, especially the second half, is something that is unbelievable and unwatchable. Only saved, the fact that this isn't unwatchable and it's merely awful is the fact of that opening bit, and some of the early on parts weren't on that level, but this is a disgraceful film. It messes with the mythology, with the kind of VR scenes. It probably has the worst Bond performance for me of all time, with Pierce Brosnan's in this film, and Halle Berry, yeah, worst Bond girl of all time probably, and the music is awful, the action is unbelievably bad, the editing is piss poor, it's some of the worst I've ever seen, unfortunately, and it's just a mess, CGI mess that is emotionless, that is just devoid of any sort of reality at all. I hate this film with a passion. Number 23, and this is the one that's not far off from the rating, but I do much prefer it, and that is Diamonds Are Forever. I thought this was an awful film, but it's not quite as an attack on the senses. It's just one of the most B-grade stuff I've ever seen. It didn't feel like they put any effort into this. Connery, returned once again after on Her Majesty's Secret Service, and it just wasn't there, and it had the awful coffin scene, which just watch to find out how bad that is. It had some awful villains, very, very bad stereotypes, and it had everything was really just piss poor, lackluster, just awful editing. The acting was atrocious. The script was just disgraceful. There's maybe 1 or 2 moments that weren't that bad. The lift fight scene and stuff. It's still an awful film, and definitely number 23 for me. Number 22 is the one that most people don't like actually now. I went to see this at cinema, and I just hated it, and I was just bored shitless really. And this was after Casino Royale, and that is Quantum of Solace, in 2008. This is a film that is just bland, generic, lifeless for the most part. Has some decent scenes at times, but mostly it is a mess and it isn't good at all. The villain is just atrocious, maybe the worst, one of the worst Bond villains. I didn't follow anything, I wasn't compelled, there was no motivations really that were meaningful. Some sort of thing to do with the environment, I'm guessing. I did not follow. And the action was just disgraceful. It was a poor imitation of the Bourne films. Something, the style of the Bourne films, Paul Greengrass's style, I'm not a diehard fan of, but it did work to an extent, and this one is just a poor imitation of that, and lazy film. Daniel Craig had to come in to help write the script at one point because there was a strike. Just a complete mess that is a bad film from me. I do think it's a bad film, and It's better than my next one, a bit better, but I do think this is in the top 3 of my least favourite Bonds. Just really, it's just a bad film. Next up, number 21 is the worst Roger Moore film, A View to a Kill. Now this has some enjoyable moments, mainly because of how laughable it is. You know, the campiness of, and Christopher Walken was a memorable villain. I would say that, you know, and he's always memorable, really. And he did kind of have fun with it. And there's some decent moments, moments that aren't awful of action at times, but mainly this film is again a mess. It's very, very half-assed, unfortunately. Very, very just generic as well, and everything. The one-liners is just excess in this film. So much. You know, I did enjoy it a bit more than Quantum of Solace, but I still didn't like it. I just thought it did have a bit more. It did actually have some charm to a sense, and it wasn't completely, you know, soulless like Quantum of Solace for the most part. But you know, it's still a bad film, and I think that definitely Roger Moore's worst. He was past it here. He didn't want to be. He even said he was too old for the. You know, you can't expect him to have done the stunts. And of course he didn't do the stunts mostly. He got a really, really bad stuntman to do all the stuff, and that's one of the things as well. You can see easily that it's not him, and it's just, none of it feels like there's an effort put into it really, and it's just very, very campy. Yes, you can enjoy some of it to an extent because of that, but really it's not Bond standards at all. It's very, very below the mark, and it is a bad film for me. Sometimes it's actually appalling. You have to go back and rewatch it, and you will be shocked actually sometimes if you've not seen it for a while, about how bad some of the stuff is. Nothing really to praise too much. Yeah. So number 20. No, I think this was mediocre. So this was, you know, all these ones onwards aren't bad. They're just, some of them aren't ones that I like too much. Moonraker. Now this is the second worst Moore film for me. It started off, it could have been average / good. I think the villain was quite impressive. I thought the locations and the energy to it they had, you know, was quite good. The adventure feel. I think there was quite a few things that were, quite interesting, quite entertaining, and it was, you know, had some good colours and stuff, cinematography. Fortunately, after the hour mark mainly, it does dip a lot, and you know, the humour with Jaws it's just a punch in the face for a Bond fan. Really, it really annoys me what they've done with him, and once they reached, you know, the space parts, that is the bit that is atrocious for me. I think it's just disgraceful, a poor imitation of Star Wars. But you know, don't copy if you can't do it anywhere in as well, because that is the motto here. It looks disgraceful, the lasers, you know, shooting everything, and you know, the gravity stuff they do, and the humour with Jaws, and you know, when his romance is disgraceful, not funny. It just turns into a bore fest at the end as well, and so overall mediocre. I don't really like it too much, but yeah, I did enjoy quite a few bits in the first half mainly, but. Again, pretty shocking by Bond standards for the most part. Next up is a one that I really, I thought, when I came out of the cinema, that really pissed me off because, you know, I didn't feel ready for it at all. Went on a rewatch, I liked it a bit more, but really I still didn't like it too much, and that is Spectre. I think this is very, very, very in the middle of everything, you know, it's below average, I feel, and you know, it's not an impressive film for me. You know, it's very, very wishy-washy. You know, you don't remember a lot of it, I don't feel, and you know, a lot of the action is quite generic, although quite clean, if you know what I mean. And the train fight scene was good. The punch up between him and Batista. Daniel Craig was solid in this film actually. He was good. The Bond girl mixed, but. She wasn't bad, but you know, it has some good visuals, but overall I don't like the colour tone either. But it's just a film that doesn't really have a strong narrative. I don't feel. I didn't really care for it, you know, the characters and stuff. It was quite generic at times, and what they've done with Blofeld, it makes me interested in future Bonds with the whole mythology and the fact that they're making a universe now. At least I think they are. But the Blofeld was disappointing by Christoph Waltz, who just usually plays masterful villains, but really nothing more to say other than it did have some pretentious moments even, and for Bond to be pretentious, But yeah, Spectre just very in the middle. I didn't really feel for it. Next up is The Living Daylights, number 18. Timothy Dalton was really good in the first half. The second half turned into kind of a campy Roger Moore film, so it didn't mesh the two halves of the film. And you know, I just felt that it it started off quite good, you know, ruthless kind of, but sophisticated, and then it went into the different globetrotting locations and stuff for the sake of it. It turned into something very generic and stuff, and it just got let down a lot. Overall, I think it's a bit below average, but I did like it to an extent. Nothing more to say there. Next up, actually, is Thunderball. Now, this is a film that I watched and I thought was good, but very disappointed coming off of Goldfinger, and it is solid. I think now I wouldn't call it good; I'd call it average, actually. But you know, it's decent. It's just by Bond standards, you know, and a lot of it is quite boring for me. The underwater scenes slow it down too much, and nothing compelling going on underground, you know, under the water. The fight scenes aren't well put together, apart from the opening scene, which is actually stunning. It's the best part of the film for me. And the jetpack bit, you know, yes, it was over the top, but I loved it, and it was just great. Sean Connery is still really good, though. Actually, you know, you can always really praise Sean Connery for the most part, and he was really good. And it did have some a kind of sophisticated feel to it at times, but a lot of it was B grade as well. Didn't feel like they put a lot of effort into it, especially the actual story and the characters. Didn't really care for the villain, and overall, just a bit at times an underwater mess that just is quite a forgettable Bond, and one that I don't really care for too much. But it's better than, you know, the next one that I pick, and that is Octopussy. Although I do prefer Octopussy, which is number 16. I think this is an underrated film. I feel that it has a really good energy to it. Some really good comedy, actually, although it does get a bit too much at the end. And I just think it's a well-made adventure action film for the most part, and it does have some, you know, some stuff going for it. Nothing much more to say there. You know, I like Stephen Burkoff as well, and it has some surprisingly tense moments. Although, of course, some of the, you know, lows of the franchise, in the context, you know, in the way that it is on paper, Bond as a clown, you know, stuff like that. Yeah, give it a miss, but really, it's something that actually I surprisingly enjoyed on a rewatch. But yeah, Octopussy. Next up is The Man with the Golden Gun, at number 15. I think this is not much to speak of, really. It's nothing to, you know, run home about. It's very solid. Nothing more, nothing less, really. The final act is the weakest part, and it does become quite generic, but it's got some things going for it, and overall it's entertaining. It's well shot at times as well. I do like some of the visuals. I think Christopher Lee is quite great, actually, at times. You know, he's not given a great script in that, but it's just very yes, very solid. Nothing more to say, really. That it's just kind of in the middle for me. Now, next up is a one that fans are very split on. One of the ones that are very split on. That is Tomorrow Never Dies. Now, I think, again, this was very solid. I think it started off a lot better than, you know, it turned out. The second half was very generic, kind of modern action film. The villain's plans never came together either. Although Jonathan Pryce gave an interesting performance, I think the way his character was written let it down. The final bits on the boat and stuff, submarine, it was very underwhelming, I feel. And the Bond girl, didn't really care for her too much at all either. They kind of tried to make her, you know, an action hero and stuff, but the action wasn't well put together. You know, she done some good Michelle Yeoh was very good in the way she, you know, but it just wasn't good choreography. I feel that it was very generic and very underwhelming. Overall, this is a film that is, again, just good for me. Nothing more, but nothing less. Solid. Next up, actually, this is now all these ones onwards are ones I really like, at least. And at number 13 is Live and Let Die. A contender for the greatest Bond theme in this, you know, by the legendary Paul McCartney and Wings. But you know, I think this is actually the one that really, judge it by a theme park ride. That is what it is. You know, in terms of in disguise of a Bond film, it really is just a one that it's the purest comedy of the Bonds, I feel, and it's the one that is very, very enjoyable. It is actually well put together, action and stuff. The use of music is great. It's not just, you know, a great song. It is used very well for the action. You know, it's kind of the perfect way to kind of support the action. I felt that, you know, Roger Moore was really good. I felt yeah, the Sheriff Pepper was entertaining. It was just, I thought it was a really good comedy action film actually, and it has a lot of merit to it. Yes, it had some flaws, and the ending, the kind of some of the deaths at the end were pretty crap. But yeah, I think this is an enjoyable, at times campy, but very well made comedy film for what it's trying to be. Surprised me on a rewatch, and yeah, definitely underrated. Next up is quite another controversial one. You Only Live Twice. Now I think this is definitely was definitely a return, a bit more of a return to form after Thunderball. And you know, it has a great theme song. It has loads of great action. I liked the characters in this film quite a lot. You know, and the ninjas and everything, the ninja training sequence. Yes, the Japanese joke thing is a bit poor taste, to say the least. But I think some of the flaws, yes, they are flaws, but they don't bring it down enough to stop me from calling it great, because I do think it's a great action film. I think that the helicopter scene is epic. You know, the way the Bond music is used. I think it's got some very, very sophisticated cinematography actually, and the way the music is used is quite beautiful. I think Sean Connery was still really, really good here. Some of the final act is a bit, but generally I think this is overall a great Bond film. Definitely one I really, really enjoyed. Now, next up is a one that many will be surprised with, being this high. The World Is Not Enough. Now I think this is much better than Tomorrow Never Dies for me. I know a lot. It's a very, very split film, and generally actually the least popular of the first three Pierce Brosnans. But I just think I loved Sophia Marceau. I loved Robert Carlyle, Robbie Coltrane. The characters I think were great, and the exposition and everything, and the actual narrative of Bond kind of looking after, you know, this woman at the first. Yes, it had Denise Richards. She was dreadful, but you know, she only brought the film down so much. I still thought this was a great film. You know, I thought action was great. You know, the locations weren't overboard, but they were still very, very varied. I think it had really quite some emotional moments, and I think that the kind of subplot with M was great. And overall, it's a one that I was constantly engaged with, really. That's me. And now we come on to the top 10 James Bond films. Now, these are the ones that, without hesitation, are on my favourite films list of all time. You know, this next one and number 9, they're not masterpieces, but I think they're definitely great films. I think they're classics. I do absolutely love them. And at number 10 is the first one, the one that started it all, the one I watched Christmas Day last year. The one that, you know, it's still one of the best Bond films, Dr. No. I think this is very, very grounded. It's like a Hitchcock thriller, just like From Russia with Love. And it had so much great things in it. Really, it could have been near masterpiece if it wasn't for some of the final act. And the actual reveal of Dr. No himself, you know, it was a bit disappointing. And yeah, you know, it didn't reach, you know, a level that elevated too much, but it's just so much classic stuff that happens on screen. And Sean Connery is just legendary in this film. It's maybe the best thing about it, because he's legendary in this film. I think that it's a great thriller. It's a great action film. The editing is really, really sharp. I think it's so well directed for the most part, and I just cared, you know, really just so much about what was going on. I think it was just a really, really strong narrative, and just the one that it just has a really good feel to it, you know, and very atmospheric. Yes, you know, it's a basic plot, but you know, that for me, that never really bothers me too much with cinema in general, and certainly not for Bond films. But Dr. No, definitely a classic Bond, my 10th favourite. At number 9 is a bit of a surprise, and not much people think too much of this, but I adore it, and that is For Your Eyes Only. I think another great film. Slightly edges out Dr. No, and you know, I think I loved the romance in the film, although the Bond girl, the acting wasn't great at the beginning. It did pick up, and luckily the script I thought was great for the most part. With her exposition, added an emotional undercurrent to the film. I thought really all of the action was stunning, beautifully shot for the most part. It was a bit campy at times, but for the most part, very, very grounded. But very, very escapist in the best ways. The final act did not disappoint. It was stunning. I thought Julian Glover was great in this film. Yes, there's a couple of things like the BB character, BB Dow, but I gave this a 95%. I thought it was a great film, and number 9 on my list. Next up, at number 8. Now these are all films that I think are masterpieces, and number 8 is easily Roger Moore's finest, and that is The Spy Who Loved Me. Great theme, stunning visuals, classic cinema for me. I just think it works so well. It's iconic for a reason. It just all works really. Some of the last acts is not quite as perfect as the rest of the film, but this just works on so many levels. Even the references to Lawrence of Arabia music and stuff. It doesn't detract from this experience. It's not lazy in that sense that Moonraker and stuff was. I felt, it's just, it's a masterpiece for me. It works in every way. The action, the comedy. Jaws is just one of the most iconic villains in this film before they ruined him in Moonraker. I think the Bond girl was great. I just loved it all from start to finish. This is just a classic Bond film for me. Now these are all ones that I put in my tiers, 100% plus tiers. This next one, I'm not sure what I originally gave it, but it's a tier 2. That is easily the best of the 2 Dalton films. License to Kill. Very, very Scarface influenced, but definitely its own thing. I think this is a masterpiece, and it's just a special film. It's such a grounded one. The plot and everything is really, really engaging, and the villain is just amazing. Robert Davi, Benicio del Toro is great. I love the Bond girl and love the romance in this film, and it's just a flawless action film from start to finish for me. Thoroughly enjoyable. Very, very shocking violence at times, for Bond films at the time, and it wasn't that successful in that sense. A lot of people were very split on it, but really, for me, this is definitely one that it's getting a bit more attention now, and it's a classic Bond film for me. One of the best. I absolutely adore it. Timothy Dalton, legendary, and it's finally given the Bond film, to actually let himself, match the tone of the film. I think it was totally perfect. And number 7. Now number 6 is a film that I adore, and I just want to get that out of the way. But people would probably be like, why is it so low on your list? Because it really, for the most part, is still considered top 2 Bonds, if not the best. The most iconic, and that is Goldfinger. I adore this film. It's still probably in my top 100. It's a perfect film really for me. It's sophisticated, but very, very gritty at times. I feel that Sean Connery is just legendary once again. Not his best Bond performance, we'll get to that, and not his best Bond film, we'll get to that as well. But it's just classic. The villain, Pussy Galore. She's great in this film. It's really just a film that I adored from start to finish. Full of charm, full of great comedy that works. Very much more lighter in tone than the previous 2. And it's just the one that yes, it's the one where the franchise started worldwide, really. I would have thought that From Russia with Love would have been the one to kickstart that, but of course I'm wrong. But it's not to discount this film. It's legendary. It's masterful for me. I think everything really works to a level that is just mind-blowing, and I love it from start to finish. Now the top 5. These are the Bond films as well that I'm utterly obsessed with. And this next one, it's quite controversial, but most Bond films are. And that is number 5, Skyfall. I think yes, it's not his best Bond. Daniel Craig, of course. Spoilers. But I think that this is a masterful action film with such an emotional resonance. It's really about dealing with your past and how it can affect you. Javier Bardem's masterful character of you know, in this film, he's just brilliant, and he represents that. And the kind of dynamics that play off between him, Judi Dench, and Daniel Craig, it's just it's otherworldly. It's just so good, you know, and it's a human action film that is mind blowing. It manages to, for the most part, top itself with its action sequences. It's very, very different. It has a different twist early on, you know, with Bond. You know, that he's never going to be the same kind of thing, which kind of wasn't followed through in Spectre. But really, this is great. Everything about this film is masterful for me. I love the new Q. Great that they brought back Q here. I love Ralph Fiennes as well. I just loved it from start to finish. Javier Bardem, for me, is the best Bond villain in this film. And it's not the best Bond film. Best Bond villain, though, for me. And definitely in my top 100 films of all time. That's just me. And Skyfall, number 5. Now, number 4 is From Russia with Love. I absolutely adore this film. I think this has got one of the best romances in cinema. I think it's exotic, but it's also very, very grounded and Hitchcockian. This is the most Hitchcockian Bond film for me. You know, it's very, very influenced by North by Northwest, The Lady Vanishes, stuff like that. Kind of Strange on the Train as well. But it's very much Bond. This is for me the first perfect Bond film that appeared, and you know, I can understand how people regard this so high. Sometimes it's not given enough credit, though. I do agree with that. But yeah, generally this is very well regarded. I think Sean Connery gave the finest performance he gave as Bond. Not his best performance. That would probably be The Last Crusade. But really, this is everything that works in this film perfectly. I love the side characters. I love the narrative. It just constantly unfolds. The use of the train in the central, part of the film. Just again, for thrillers, it just escalates when you use the train well. And the fight scenes, one of the best in cinema. Robert Shaw is stunning in this film, and it's just a film I adore from start to finish. Now, the top 3 Bonds, ones that are just some of my absolute favourite films of all time in particular. Now, the top 3 of these, you know, they're kind of... 2 of them are very, very popular. One of them's a bit mixed to this day, but number 3 is GoldenEye. I think that this does something better than any Bonds, and that is the relationship that the villain and the protagonist has. I think that the fact that Sean Bean, what they've done with him in this film, was just genius. I think the action was mind-blowing. The visuals were stunning. Some people criticise the soundtrack. I love it. And I love the fact that the tank scene when they use the Bond theme. I just love all these moments, but I just cared for this film so much. The Bond girl, contender for the best, one of the best, definitely. I love her exposition, you know. It's an emotional film, definitely. But it's one that, as well, at the same time, is very, very light in tone. And, you know, it does take itself seriously when it needs to. Just in terms of tone, in terms of characters, how iconic it is, and how much of a perfect definition of an action film for me it is. It has to be number 3, and Pierce Brosnan's easily best film, best performance he's ever given, not just Bond, and I love this film. It's perfect for me. Now, the top 2. These are the Bond films that got my 100% plus tier 1 rating. Although GoldenEye, you know, very, very close, if not into there now. But these next two ones are ones that, you know, I'd never seen one of these before this rewatch of Bond. Never seen it. It blew me away, and it stumped me. You know, I just thought, you know, the one that was always my favourite until now is kind of could be different, and it took me a while to, when I rewatched that other one, to finally decide what it is that I like most. And I came to the decision. You know, I came to the conclusion. Number 2 is Casino Royale. The fact that this is not number 1 says everything about number 1. But this film is one of the most human action films I've ever seen. It makes me cry every time. The romance and everything that happens. It's beautiful in every sense. You know, the visuals, just how human it is. The script just works perfectly. I don't care about the criticisms of the product placement. It does not bother me at all. And I think it's one of the most mind-blowing action films in cinema. And I think it's just everything that Bond is without appearing, you know, necessarily like a instant Bond film, you know, with the traditional gun barrels and all that sort of stuff. It didn't need to be, you know, it was its own film and it earned its status. When the credits rolled, shattered, but also just blood pumping through the veins, you know. It was an emotional film, but also one of the most epic I've ever seen. And number 2. And finally, number 1 is the one that's very unexpected, but you'll know what it is by now. That is On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I think that this is far and away the best Bond film. It's the one that moves me the most, and for me is the perfect definition of what Bond is. The one that everyone, you know, hated at the time mostly. It was praised in areas, but George Lazenby easily today is the least popular Bond. I am a big fan of George Lazenby in this film. I think he was great, and clearly Sean Connery wouldn't have been as good. You know, look at the next film, you know, that he was in, and also, you know, he was never as good as he was in From Russia with Love and Goldfinger after, you know, with Thunderball and stuff. You know, I think that this is the most human Bond for me. It's also the most fantastical in places. Very dreamlike visuals. The editing is otherworldly. It's the most romantic film, Bond film. Some of the best action scenes in cinema and definitely in the franchise. You know, it contends with Casino Royale and stuff for that action. You know, and it's got a perfect mix. You know, the characters, the narrative, the fact that it's, you know, it just focuses so much on this romance, and it's easily the best romance. Diana Rigg, the best Bond girl of all time. I think she was legendary in this film, probably better than Bond was, and that doesn't discount Lazenby. It's just, this film was perfect in my eyes. It's beyond perfection. It's one of the best films I've ever seen in my life. It has probably a contender for the best soundtrack for Bond film, the way it's used. This is the one that means the most to me. It's the one that it's the most emotional for me, the most beautiful in every sense. Thrilling from start to finish, and one of my absolute favourite action films, full stop. You know, I think that they'll never beat this film. You know, maybe they'll do it once or twice, but even Casino Royale is not better than this film for me, personally. And yes, it's an unexpected pick, but it's my pick, and it's the one that means the most to me, and I can justify why I think it's the best, the finest. It does so many things that Bond's never done, you know, the wedding as well. It's just, you know, the last sort of half an hour, 45 minutes is just some of the most perfect pieces of cinema that I've ever seen, and it just has everything, ticks all the boxes and more. You know, I never thought a Bond film could do this. You know, like Casino Royale kind of done it, but I think this just takes the edge because I cared the most about it and it moved me the most, and the perfect mix of everything, and the one that it definitely shattered me the most. Very emotional film, tragic, but also in every sense epic. So there we have it, my Bond ranking, all 24 Bonds, and it's been one of the best experiences in recent years that I've had with films, you know, watching this franchise from start to finish. Some of them have been bad, but even then it was interesting to see, and then most of the Bond films I do like. You know, some of these films surprised me, like On Her Majesty's Secret Service, I'd never seen, you know, and I can't wait to rewatch it again, most of the films, and, you know, before Bond 25, and cannot wait for that film. You know, Danny Boyle is a legend, and yeah, I just think Bond is one of the best franchises, definitely. It's had its lows, but overall, you know, most franchises have. But yes, thanks for watching my ranking of the Bond films, and if you want to check out my individual reviews, I've got a link to the playlist in the description. Thanks for watching, and leave your rankings in the comments. There's never going to be a Bond ranking that's the same, but it's always interesting to see, you know, and of course, respect to everyone, you know, all have their own opinions. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what your rankings are. Thanks for watching.